and welcome to this year's episode of the WHL Trade Deadline Extravaganza here on the Area 51 Sports Network. My name is Adam Kurzenblatt. I am the writer for the Vancouver Giants here on the Area 51 Sports Network, and we are going to dive right into a busy day, busy couple weeks of the trade deadline in the WHL. Now, it is 2 p.m. Pacific time here on January 10th, which means that the trade deadline for the WHL has passed. Now, that does not mean that there will not be some trades announced later. So we will keep an eye on that. But what we're going to do is we're going to go basically on a team-by-team basis, look at what some of the teams have done, look at what some of the surprising moves that have happened. And at the end, we're going to discuss what's going on with the playoff picture. So before we jump in here and look at overall, we're going to dive into the Everett Silvertips. That's going to be our first team that we're looking at here because the Everett Silvertips have made quite a few moves here in the last couple weeks, shipping out players. So we're going to focus on the two major moves. The first one being that they shipped Braden Holt over to Victoria, and they got back Tyler Palmer. Now, for those who remember, Braden Holt, spectacular in the playoffs last year, or in the regular season last year for the Everett Silvertips. Cohen McInnes ended up taking over that series against the Giants. But Braden Holt, when they traded Cohen McInnes at the beginning of the year, because Braden Holt was supposed to be that guy, in the end, they decided to move him to Victoria for Tyler Palmer, who will start right there in the goaltending. So Tyler Palmer, 5 games played so far, 2-3 record, a 380 goals against, and 880 save percentage. Now, for those that don't remember, Tyler Palmer, there was a little bit of a awkward situation in Victoria. He finally got the opportunity to play somewhere else. He's now going to lead this Everett Silvertips team, which is basically in the middle of a massive rebuild, because just on Sunday, they pulled off the biggest trade of the trade deadline. We'll call it that. And that is that they sent Ryan Hofer and 2-time World Junior gold medalist Olin Zellweger over to the Kamloops Blazers, and they got back 3 first-round picks, a second-round pick, a third-round pick, a fourth-round pick, a fifth-round pick, and 4 players on top of that. So what we're going to do is, before we look at the Kamloops side of this, we're going to look at what Everett got back in return. So first we have Caden Hamill, strong defenseman, right shot, 6'2", 181. He is eligible for this year's draft. He is a player that if he is going to go in the draft, he'll be one of those later selections. This was the 19th overall pick back in 2020 of the WHL Bantam draft. He just played his 100th career game, 24 points. You know, he has been very, very good for this Kamloops Blazers team over the past year. He, like I said, he is draft eligible. He will get some interest. I know that Adam Tate over at McKean's Hockey has written about him. So if you want to go check out that scouting report, make sure to go check that out. Next, we have Rylan Purse, who's 17-year-old, who was playing for the Kamloops Blazers and Flin Flon Bombers this year in the SJHL. He's got 2 points in 8 career games with the Kamloops Blazers. 5'9", 165-pound defenseman. You know, he's a mobile defenseman. That was another pick up on the defense. Everett wanted to build their blue line out. So this was really a let's see how many defensemen we can get type of trade. The other player going back is Raphael Peltier. Now, this is a 20-year-old, so this will be his final WHL season, 5'10", 163 pounds. Now, Peltier was part of this deal because we'll call it part of this deal because Drew Englot was part of the deal that he went from Kamloops to Everett, but then Englot was flipped to Swift Current for a second-round pick. So we're going to call him as part of this deal. 28 points in 34 games for Swift Current so far. This was really a management move so that Swift Current could fill out or could empty out a 20 slot in this to get Drew Englot in. So that is where that move stands. And then we have the big part of this Everett trade, which is Jack Baker. Now, this Jack Baker, he is a very young 15-year-old. Jack Baker is a forward, 15-year-old. He has good size of 6 foot. 154 pounds. He comes from that Burnaby Winter Club U15 prep team, which Burnaby Winter Club is one of the top teams for development out in BC. And you also have he also is playing for the Delta Hockey U18 Academy. So anytime that you have a Delta Hockey Academy U18 player as a 15-year-old playing in the U18, it doesn't really matter the team necessarily, but especially Delta, which is considered one of these top teams in development, that's always a good sign. And, for all of those Everett Silvertip fans, he's putting up 15 points in 13 games, 11 goals. This guy has, goal scoring potential. And I think that was a major part. As for the draft picks, well, you get 3 first rounders. How can you can't really look at the value of the first rounder yet. They're going to be late first rounders, at least this year, especially with Kamloops holding the Memorial Cup. But the fact that you've gained, 10 potential players here with all of these you got 4 first round draft picks. So the fact that you've gained 10 potential players on top of, Jack Baker, who's going to be a big part of your team, or Kane Hamill, who's going to be a big part of your team, Rylan Pierce, who will be a big part of your team next year. So this was really a Everett building for the future. Now they're still in the playoff race. We'll talk about the playoff race a little bit later, but they are the 5th seed. So for them to miss the playoffs would be a massive collapse. I don't see that happening. They still got some very good players, whether it's Austin Rose, Jackson Berezowski, or Ben Hammerling, Aiden Sutter as well as down there. So this team, if you're Everett, you're still going to make the playoffs, but you're going to be adding a ton of young talent to your team that will hopefully be helping you in the future. Okay, so let's move over to those Kamloops Blazers then. Kamloops, as we know, brought in Olin Zellweger and Ryan Hofer. They also did acquire Matthew Kipper as well, who is the backup goaltender for Regina at the time. He's going to be their backup behind. He's going to be their backup in Kamloops for the rest of the season behind Dylan Ernst. But let's look at what Kamloops is getting here. So Ryan Hofer, we all know how good Ryan Hofer was based off of last season. So this is a 6th round pick of the Washington Capitals. He is 20 years old, so this is his final year in the WHL. 6'3", 181 pounds. He put up 58 points in 67 games and then really went on a tear in the playoffs in the first round with 10 points in 6 games. But this year, point a game player, 36 points in 36 games with 23 of those being goals. He's going to add another element to this Kamloops team that is really stacked. Now, the question is, where does Ryan Hofer play? He can play on the wing, but he's mostly a center. But if you look at that Kamloops top 2 center, you have Fraser Minton and Logan Stankoven down the middle. So is this an opportunity to move maybe Minton to that 3rd spot on the team and that 3rd line? Or is Minton going to move to the wing? Are you going to have somebody like Logan Stankoven move to the wing? So this actually provides the Kamloops Blazers with a little bit more versatility in their top 6. So they have one of the top 6s in the league. They're in the top 10 for the CHL power rankings once again, and their offense is a major part of that. Caden Bankier is there as well. Matthew Semenoff is there as well. So this team is very, very stacked. And they're going to the Memorial Cup regardless. So this move is to really shore up that team. And then on the back end, you got Olin Zellweger. Now, I don't know how much we have to talk about how good Olin Zellweger is. Now, this is a guy who definitely should have been going in the first round back in 2021. He fell to the Ducks at 34th overall. I know that some people have a little bit of problem with his size. He is listed at 5'10", 174 at the moment. But, there's a reason that Olin Zellweger was the WHL player or WHL defenseman of the year last year. This guy is absolutely incredible to watch. One of the best offensively skilled defensemen to come through the WHL in the last couple of years. 78 points in 55 games last year. And then this year, he's already at 28 and 23. As I mentioned, back-to-back gold medals at the World Juniors. He was a major part of that power play at the World Juniors. So now he's going to get that opportunity to play with Stankoven and play with Caden Bankier on a full-time basis. And it's one of those moves that you just look at the Kamloops Blazers and they know this is their opportunity to go for it. They're hosting the Memorial Cup. This is not unusual for a Memorial Cup team to mortgage the future in order to, go on this massive run. So it really should be some exciting time, especially if you are a Kamloops Blazer fan. The offense is very strong. The question now is, can the goaltending of Matthew Caper and Dylan Ernst carry them? So that will be a big question. As I said, the WHL trade deadline is complete, but sometimes these deals do come in late. So we'll keep an eye if Kamloops does anything, or if they've spent all their draft capital and their trade assets to acquire Olin Zellweger and Ryan Hofer. So next we're going to jump down to Seattle. Now, Seattle didn't do anything massive at the trade deadline today, but they have made quite a few moves. So we're going to start with Colton Dach, who comes over for Ty Hurley, Ethan Mittelstadt, fourth rounder, first rounder, and a second rounder, and that comes from Kelowna. Colton Dach, another member of that 2020 or the 2023 World Junior team. He got injured. He's going to be out for about 8 weeks, so that's something to watch. But you look at this Seattle team, what they've been able to do. They acquired Nolan Alon. They acquired Luke Prokop before the deadline. They got the news that Brad Lambert's coming to Seattle. So this is a team that is absolutely stacked. This is a team with 9 different drafted players. You have Thomas Milic and Scott Ratzlaff, who are making possibly one of the best goaltending duels in the entire WHL. You have, like I said, you have a defense that features Kevin Korchinski, Luke Prokop, and Noah Alon, Jeremy Hansel, who are four of the strongest players in the U.S. division on defense. Guys like Luca Cagnoni, Reed Schaefer, Jordan Gustafson, Jared Davids. And then you got guys like Tija Ginla, who is going to be up for the draft this year. You have just so much in Seattle, and this team, it's not a one-off team. I know that a lot of the players are not going to be back next year, but this Seattle team could really be good for a couple years, especially with the fact that the majority of their team are in that the majority of the team are in that 18 to 16-year-old range. So it's not going to be a one-off year. I know that a lot of the players are probably going to leave. They do have to make quite a few choices when it comes to who's going to be their 20-year-old next year. So we'll see what happens, because if my math is correct, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, so 10 players in that 2003 range that they'll have to decide on who's coming back next year. So that Seattle is definitely a team to watch. There's a reason that on this week's WHL Power Rankings, they were number 2, right behind the Winnipeg Ice. So that is definitely something to watch. And speaking of the Winnipeg Ice, we'll jump over to them. Now, they haven't made a ton of moves just yet, or they didn't make a ton of moves in total. They made some of their moves pretty early on. So the big move was that they traded for Mason Beaupit and Graham Sword out of Spokane. Those were 2 separate moves, but Graham Sword, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 5th, as well as Jeremy Brinson, and then Mason Beaupit and an 8th for Dawson Cowan, 4th, 3rd, and 6th. So that kind of solidified their defense. That solidified their goaltending. Those are both drafted players. They also got Wyatt Wilson out of Victoria, who is a good, bottom of the pair defenseman. He'll be solid for them. But the big move was the Zach Ostapchuk trade. So a 3 first rounders, a 5th rounder. You got Skylar Bruce, Connor Dale, Owen Breeze, and Hudson Landmark for Zach Ostapchuk, who is another member of that double gold club for Team Canada. So a lot of these double gold club members for Team Canada moving at this year's trade deadline. Zach Ostapchuk, there's not much you can. Zach Ostapchuk is a fantastic player. He was the heart and soul of this Vancouver Giants team in the playoffs last year. he was their captain this year and last year after they traded Justin Sordiff, which means that the Giants have traded Justin Sordiff they've traded their captain for the second straight year at the trade deadline. But this is a big guy who scores big goals and plays his best in the biggest moments. From the Giants side, Skylar Bruce, 5'11" winger, 165 or 135 games. He is a 2003, so he can be back next year. 15 points with 33 games with Winnipeg. Connor Dale, 6 foot, 165 pound winger, 2005 born. This is his first WHL season. He's played in 24 games, so both of those guys are expected to be in the lineup. Maybe not necessarily tomorrow when the Giants play Winnipeg or Kamloops, but definitely on the weekend. And then Hudson Landmark. This is a Hudson Landmark is a 15-year-old. He's got 18 points in 24 games so far for Sherwood Park Kings U18 team. He also plays on penalty kill, has two shorthanded assists there. And then Owen Breeze from Lethbridge. He's a defenseman, so he's the only defenseman they got back. Northern Alberta Extreme program, which is a fantastic program over in Alberta. 6'1", 176 pounds. And this guy is, a offensively gifted defenseman who's able to score and produce points. So from a Vancouver Giants perspective, they lose their captain ahead of the playoffs, but you can't argue with getting 3 first-round picks back for Zach Ostapchuk in this case. As for some of the other moves over in the WHL, the other big move that the Kelowna Rockets have transferred Noah Flamand over to Brandon for a third, fifth, and Trey Johnson. Noah Flamand is going to play a big part in that Brandon Wheat Kings lineup. And then Brandon transfers Jake Chason over to Saskatoon right before for a first, a second, and a second. So they're able to acquire a player that they believe, I guess, is in their mind will be a little bit better than or that Jake Chason will be, or Noah Flandin will be able to replace Jake Chason and what he brings to the lineup. And then on top of that, Brandon also acquired Dawson Pasternak from the Portland Winterhawks and Mason Ward from the Swift Current Broncos. So the Brandon Wheat Kings, they're making some big moves. They're not really changing a big part of their roster, but they're making big moves in that they're kind of solidifying their roster because they believe that they can make a run at this Eastern Conference final. In Brandon right now, their final playoff spot. Brandon right now is the ninth place spot. They're 1 point out of eighth, which is run by Swift Current, but Swift Current has 4 games in hand, so that is something to watch out for. Now, if you do have questions, make sure to drop them in the comment section, then we can answer them here on the live stream. So make sure to check that out for sure. And yeah, we'll be happy to try to answer any WHL questions that may come in. We can also answer, some OHL questions about Shane Wright trade. We have a little bit of information on that. We'll throw this out there that a lot of people are looking at the OHL trade of Shane Wright, just like me, wondering where the first rounders. A little piece of information for you there. In the OHL, you can't trade first rounders. So that is where that information comes from. Outside of that, this WHL trade deadline, it was very, very busy. I don't think that we've seen this many first rounders traded in such a short amount of time. If my math is correct, that is 8 first rounders traded since Sunday. So, it seems that in the West, a lot of teams understand that it's Seattle and it's Kamloops who are going to be, are going all in. That seems to be the understanding. But in the East, it seems to be very wide open, even though, Winnipeg Ice are this powerhouse team and they're ranked number 1 in the WHL in the CHL, actually, when it comes to the rankings. You got a team like Saskatoon, Red Deer, once again, top of the table, Moose Jaw. Like these teams are are at the top of their game right now. And then of course, what happens when Connor Bedard gets into the playoffs with the Regina Pats. I know like Stanislav Svilov on the back end there. What can Regina do? As we know it, as the GM of Regina has stated multiple times, there is zero chance that they are trading Connor Bedard. So that is something to look forward to. So what we're going to do right now is we are going to pull up the standings of the WHL and just quickly take a look at where all of the teams stand as of right now. Okay, so here we have it. So to jump on here, we're going to start with the Eastern Conference. So these are the conference rankings. So as I mentioned, Winnipeg Ice leading the pack, 58 points in 34 games. It looks like they are on their way to the top of the table once again, but Red Deer is close. One thing that sticks out for me with Winnipeg is that they're not giving up a ton of goals. So we see 88 goals against in 34 games. That's pretty good. Mason Beaupit, as I mentioned, has really solidified that roster at the moment. So that is something to pay attention to. Then we'll move over to the Red Deer Rebels. This is another powerhouse team. As we saw, they did lose Archdeep Baines last year, who was the league leader in points last year. Remember, they also had the scary situation with Chase Coward, who unfortunately cannot play this year due to injury that potentially has ended his hockey career. But they have had solid goaltending from Kyle Kelsey and Red Stoser. That is, I don't think that people really expected Red Deer to be this high at the top of the table, especially considering what's going on with their goaltending. But, give them credit. They have stepped up. You got Jaden Grube, 42 points in 35 games. You got Kalen Lind, brother of Cole Lind. And then Mats Lindgren has come over and really helped them on the back end. Mats Lindgren, big story. He was in Kamloops last year, asked for a trade out, and it looks like he is doing pretty well right now for the Red Deer Rebels. Okay, now we're going to move over to Saskatoon, just do a little quick breakdown of the Saskatoon Blades. This is a team that doesn't get talked about a lot. They have been in the power rankings for the WHL, but this is a very good team, led by Trevor Wong. He was lighting it up in Kamloops before he got traded for Colton Dach. Still not drafted. That is very surprising. I know that for me, I'm a big Trevor Wong fan. He is a 2003, so he could be drafted this year, and he can be back next year, so that's something to watch. But Brendan Lewalski, Connor Roulette, Josh Pilar, like these are guys who are making a difference. And then, of course, they just recently acquired Jake Chason, who was the Edmonton Oilers pick today. And then if you look in goal, Austin Elliott and Ethan Chadwick, this is a common theme, it seems, in the East, where they're not going with one goaltender, they're going with two solid goalies. So this is a team that currently has allowed 77 goals and scored 141. So that is definitely a team to watch out for, especially in the second round. If everything goes the way it is supposed to, they will be playing, Red Deer in the second round. That could be a very good matchup. Those are two teams that don't give up a ton of chances either way. Could be a real tight series. And that third or fourth spot will be important, especially, to avoid Winnipeg and Red Deer in the second round. Okay, so let's jump over to the fourth seed, which is Moose Jaw right now. As of right now, they do have 49 points in 38 games. This is more of a balanced team, offensively and defensively. They haven't gotten the best of goaltending from Jackson Unger, but Connor Unger, once again, fantastic. 922 save percentage, 264 goals against, and 19 wins. This is a stacked team, whether it's Jaeger Fergus, Dante Matejchuk, Ryder Korzak, Robert Bako. He was spectacular at the World Juniors. Martin Resvy, but then we look at Brendan Jaeger, 48 points in 38 games. Remember, this is a guy who's supposed to go in the top 10 at the draft. There's a little bit of whether he's going to be a top 10 player, but this guy is a top 10 talent for sure in the draft, for the upcoming draft. So that is definitely a team to watch out for. Moose Jaw, they have like I said, they have the offensive talent, but can they stop the puck? That's the question. Can they, on a consistent basis, ensure that they're not giving up 3, 4, or 5 goals a game? So next we jump over to the Calgary Hitmen here. Calgary is a very good team. Once again, sorry, they do have some good players, some solid drafted players, but once again, a team that doesn't score a lot, but is pretty good at defending. 37 games played, 46 points, 104 goals against, 131 goals for. None. It's a team that is doing it a lot by committee. This is a team with 4 players who are over 30 points and 7 players over 20 points this year. Got and then in goal, Braden Peters and Ethan Bonaventura. That's a split, 19 games each. Both are pretty good. They're both over 900, both under 3 goals against, and they're splitting the starts right now. So this is a team that, they play a good system. So there's not necessarily a star on this team, but they're very good in that they know how to play with each other, and that makes them a very dangerous team. We always look for who's the star on this team, who's going to step up, who's going to do this, who's going to do that thing in the playoffs. But it really is these teams that have come together and can play well together that have the biggest advantage in the WHL playoffs. Okay, so next we jump over to Lethbridge. Lethbridge is a very similar team to Calgary. 38 points, 38 games, 44 points. They have allowed more goals than they have scored, 115, 108. But they are a team that is, it's a by committee team. Go look at guys like Jet Jones, Cole Shepard, Tyson Zimmer, Logan Wormold. That's 4 players over 30 points. And you're getting point, it's not like you have 30, 30, 30, and then 10, 5. You got 12 players and 10 or more points this year. They have used quite a few goaltenders, but Harrison Mengen is their go-to guy. 17 wins, 8 losses, 912 save percentage, 270 goals against. And what it really looks like is that when he's not in net, it's the goaltend. That's kind of when they're giving up their goals. So this is definitely a team to watch out for. I don't know if they can, they're right now the 6th seed. That would match them up with Saskatoon. I don't know if they can take down Saskatoon, but that is definitely a team to watch just because that could be just a fun team to watch. It's always nice to root for these teams that aren't necessarily stacked when it comes to draft picks and things like that, but they're hardworking teams. So that's always, it's always kind of fun to watch that. Next, we roll on to the Regina Pats, and I mean, do we really have to say much about the Regina Pats? Besides the fact that Connor Bedard has 70 points in 29 games. So, I mean, I know they're the 7th seed right now, but they're not going to end the 7th seed. Connor Bedard, Connor Bedard and Stanislav Svidlov, as I mentioned, were both at the World Juniors. They've missed a ton of time. So once they come back, that should be a very interesting combination to watch. Tanner Howes at 50 points in 39 games. That's a prospect for this year's draft. Alexander Sudilev, he is drafted by the Washington Capitals. He's provided 49 points in 38 games. That he's been fantastic for them this year. But it's what is their defense going to look like? Goaltending, Drew Sim, 898 save percentage, 15 wins, 10 losses in 28 games. He is their starter. He's been good, but he's their defense is allowing a little too many chances. So can their defense come together and really step up their game and become a strong overall team? We see this in the NHL with Connor McDavid. There's a reason that Connor McDavid does not have a Stanley Cup. It's because you need more than one player to win a Stanley Cup. It's the same with the Memorial Cup. You need more than one player. So I know that a lot of people were saying, Regina, you need to trade Connor Bedard and get as many assets back as possible. That didn't happen. They believe that they can have that with Connor Bedard, they'll have a shot at, running the table. So I guess we'll see. We'll see what if John Paddock's theory plays off here. Swift Current 8th overall right now. They are a team kind of finding their way at the moment. They got 2 drafted goaltenders in Reed Duke and Gage Alexander. Both have not had the best of seasons so far. They're another team that has struggled scoring. They're being outscored at the moment. But you look at this team and some of the additions that they have got in Drew Englet and Mason Ward. We'll see what happens with those two if they can provide some spark. Matthew Ward, 43, Josh Philman, 38 points in 30 games. You got Owen Pickering, Connor Hevest, Josh Davis. Those are some of the drafted players that are coming over to or that are in Swift Current and going to help them with that playoff push. Right now, as I mentioned, they are in 8th place overall. So that is something just to look at for Swift Current. Brandon Wheat Kings, as we mentioned, they did make some moves today. They're another team that struggled scoring 135 points in 117 games. There's a lot of issues when it comes to goaltending in the WHL, in that a lot of players or a lot of teams are very good at scoring, but they're not necessarily the best at keeping the puck out of their net. As for Brandon, it's just that they're not getting enough opportunities. When Carson Barnson is in net, they're fine. When anybody else is in net, that's a problem. But we'll see what happens. They just added, as mentioned, Dawson Pasternak and Noah Flamand. We'll see what they can do there. This is a team that doesn't have any drafted players anymore on their team, but Nate Danielson is a top prospect. He's expected to go in the top 15 around there. And also you have, let me just pull this up. Who am I thinking of? We have one more top prospect in here. I believe it's Nolan Ritchie. Yes. So Nolan Ritchie. Oh no, sorry. Nolan Ritchie is 20-year-old. But just watching this team, you got 2 top prospects and Nathan Danielson, who is supposed to go in the top 15, and Carson Barnstrom, who will be the top goaltender projected to go in the draft. And then we have Medicine Hat here, 34 points in 39 games. They're fighting for that final spot. They're a decent team. They definitely have some issues that they have to shore up. Their team is not as deep as they probably wanted going into the out of the draft, but Caden Lindstrom is a fantastic player. I can tell you that. Just watching him at the U17s was great. You have guys like Brennan Lee, 38 points in 39 games. Drew Krebs on the defense, 22 points in 38 games. So that is definitely something to watch. And we'll see what happens with their goaltending. Their goaltending is the big question. Next, to round off, in 11th place right now, we have Prince Albert. That's 31 points in 38 games. Overall, like a lot of these teams, they need to come together. They don't have anybody on their team who has been drafted at the moment. This is kind of their rebuild year. A lot of 17-year-olds, a lot of 16-year-olds, a lot of 18-year-olds. So we'll see if they, can get that experience and make it to the playoffs so that their younger players can get that experience. And lastly, we'll jump in here with the Edmonton Oil Kings. Now, Edmonton has just been selling off players left, right, and center. So the Edmonton, they're going to finish. It's tough. It's tough to be an Edmonton Oil King this year because you watch just how they played last year, the stacked roster that they had, and it just hasn't worked out. Logan Cunningham is the new guy in town there at goal. He's a pretty good goaltender. We'll see what happens. He was over in Alberta. He was in Alberta. He was in Victoria before moving over to Alberta. But yeah, Luca Hoff, pretty good player right there. They did it for a while there. They didn't have any 2003 born players, but they just acquired Jacob Hofrogo, who's a defenseman. So that's a 2003 born player. But we'll see what happens with this team. This is a very young team. They have the potential to be good, but as I mentioned, this is a rebuild year for them after going to the Memorial Cup, 11 points in 39 games. So that is not necessarily ideal and something to watch. Okay, so we have reached about the halftime show of our trade deadline show. We're going to run a quick 1-minute ad here and then be back to talk about the Western Conference.
Allow me to introduce High Stick Vodka, a new way to celebrate victory. Gather around the glass with an award-winning, ultra-premium Canadian-made vodka. You probably won't listen when I say High Stick Vodka has a smooth, hard-hitting taste, or that it's developed in the birthplace of hockey. You won't listen when I say High Stick Vodka is a tribute to the game of hockey, or when I tell you it's distilled 4 times using Canada's purest mountain spring water to provide an authentic, remarkable flavor. But maybe you will listen when I say it comes in a f***ing hockey stick. Showcase your passion for hockey with our limited edition hand-blown hockey stick bottle. Whether you're celebrating victory or drinking to defeat, High Stick Vodka is better after every shot. Visit us at highstickvodka.com. It also comes in this regular bottle. Celebrate victory. Drink responsibly.
And welcome back after that quick ad break here. Now we're going to jump focus over to the Western Conference of the WHL. Now this is where we saw a lot of the movement was over in the Western Conference, especially with Seattle Thunderbirds, who are just stacking themselves up for a Memorial Cup run here. So Seattle, number 2 team in the country right now, 58 points in 35 games. Let's run through some. We've already run through their roster, but this is a absolutely stacked team. They're getting Thomas Milic back. They're getting Kevin Korchinski back. They're getting Noah Alon back. Who knows what Brad Lambert's going to be able to do, Colton Dock when he returns. So this is a team definitely to watch in the Western Conference. And with Kamloops already hosting the Memorial Cup, you don't want to say that Kamloops is going to mail it in the playoffs. If they make it to the Western final, they're probably going to push. But if the Western final is Seattle versus Kamloops, how hard are those 2 teams going to go, knowing that they have to compete in the Memorial Cup in just a few weeks after that? So Portland is right now at second place. As we saw, they moved out Dawson Pasternak. This is theoretically to make room for Chaz Lucius. This is it's more of just finding opportunities for everybody. Chaz Lucius, 19-year-old Winnipeg Jets draft pick. I don't think we need to really go much further into who Chaz Lucius is, because he was absolutely fantastic at the World Juniors. Not surprising, but Portland is a good team. They've only lost 6 times in regulation this whole season. 142 goals for, 103 goals against. We'll see what happens, when they go up against the Kamloopses and Seattle in the playoffs. What's going to happen there? Robbie from DeLorme having a great overager year, 43 points in 34 games. You got guys like Glebe Clausen, James Stefan, Ryan McCleary, Mark Ulsher, and then of course in that you have the combo of Jan Spooner and Dante Giannuzzi. So we'll see, exactly where they can go from here, especially since they do have a very, very strong team on the whole. Okay, so next is the Memorial Cup host, the Kamloops Blazers. Now, as we mentioned, Kamloops really went for it with acquiring Olin Zellweger and Ryan Hofer. They also have Jakob Demick, who is injured at the moment, so he'll be coming back later. But you just run through this roster just at the top here. Logan Stankoven, 46 points in 22 games. Dylan Kiefler, 33 games, 41 points. Kyle Masters, 39 points, 35 games. Fraser Minton, 27 points, 37 games. Matthew Seminoff, 30 points in 36 games. And then you have Caden Bankier, 25 points, 35 games. And then Connor Levis at the end there, 31 points in 36 games. So 7 players with 30 points. The big question around this team is goaltending. Obviously, Dylan Ernst has had a pretty good start to the year. 31 games played, 919 save percentage, 236 goals against average. Now, he isn't facing a ton of shots as well per game. He's only had 783 shots in those 31 games. So it's more, the play when Kamloops plays, they're very good at boxing out their defenders or their checks in the defensive zone and kind of blocking those shots and limiting those opportunities. So we'll really see what happens there. But this is a team that is set for the Memorial Cup run. I know that they wanted to pull off the Bedard trade. Didn't happen, but they are a very strong team, and once again another team that is in the top 10 for the CHL in the CHL rankings this week. In fourth place, so these are the top three teams. It goes 58, 55, 50, and then it's kind of the rest. So we have in fourth place we have the Vancouver Giants, 38 points, 38 games. They're at 500 at the moment. This is a team that they are allowing a lot of goals. They're not scoring, but when they do win, they win their games 2-1, 3-2. Big problem with the Vancouver Giants, so they got to stay out of the penalty box because right now they are taking a little bit too many penalties. But just breaking down their roster a little bit, Jesper Vikman is now the only drafted player on that team. He's been spectacular again this year. Brett Meerwald has really stepped up in the last little bit. But this team is going to, Samuel Honzik is out for a while. So this team is really going to be led by Ty Thorpe, the overager, Jaden Lipinski, who his draft stock is rising, and guys like Mazden Leslie, Ty Haliburta, and Ethan Semenuk. All of these guys are draft eligible. They're playing for their NHL draft futures this year. And just based off of watching them play all year, this is a team that is getting better and better. They might have the odd step back, in a game, but they've won 3 of their last 4 games. They're starting to gel. They're starting to play better defensively. So we'll really see what happens with this Vancouver Giants team. And, that 4 and 5 spot is so key in the WHL this year for the playoffs, because if you get that 4 or 5, you're missing Kamloops, Portland, or Seattle in that first round. So, as we saw with Vancouver last year, upsets are possible, but you don't want to run into Seattle, Portland, or Kamloops probably in the first round of this year's playoffs. Okay, so next we jump to the Everett Silvertips, who we talked about a little bit earlier. They went on a fire sale, trading a lot of their players. As we mentioned, Ben Hammerling, Jackson Barakowski, Austin Rose are leading that team right now offensively. On defense, we'll see who really steps up, but Aiden Sutter is a great defenseman who should see increased opportunity. And what can Tyler Palmer do? That's the big question around Everett. So we'll see if Tyler Palmer can pull off the same type of performances that Braden Holt was pulling off earlier this year. Okay, next we jump over to Tri-City, which is a very interesting team. Now, Tri-City is one of these teams up on the rise, and a big reason for that is the play of Lukas Dragicevic, who has been absolutely spectacular this year, 46 points in 36 games. They also have Parker Bell, 43 points in 34 games. But the big question around this team is goaltending. So you have Nicholas Avakayan, who has been okay. He has an 860 goals against, but Thomas Suknek just came back from the World Juniors, was absolutely fantastic at the World Juniors. This is a guy who led Czechia to a silver medal. So can he do the same with Tri-City and lead them, to a first round victory or even farther? Tri-City, this is a dangerous team to watch, or dangerous team to play, because it's kind of like how we saw in the Eastern Conference, where they might not have a ton of drafted players, but they play very well in the system that they have created there. So we will see what exactly happens with the Tri-City Americans. They are right now in that 6th spot, 37 points in 36 games. So that whole 4, 5, 6 spot is very tight at the moment. And also the 7th spot with the Prince George Cougars, who will jump in here, who are 35 points in 36 games. Now, Prince George, they have the offense, but their goaltending has kind of been problematic this year. Tyler Brennan injuries have really played a factor in this. An 881 save percentage, 350 goals against, and only 6 wins. But Ty Young, the Vancouver Canucks draft pick, 896, 380, 9 wins. So this is a team that really has to get their goaltending sorted, because this is not a team that should be having these goaltending issues. When you look at it, they have 141 goals for and 141 goals against. That shows you that they're not incapable of putting the puck in their net. Cohen Zimmer, 52 points. Riley Heath, 52 points. Both of those are draft eligible players. So those are players that you're probably going to see next year. Ethan Sampson, their captain, 27 points in 29 games. Philadelphia Flyers draft pick. That he has been, he doesn't get talked about enough. But also Hudson Thornton, 41 points in 36 games. Chase Wheatcroft as well as there. Like, this is a team that is very, very good, and another team that plays well in their system, but they have to find a way to stop. They have to find a way to stop the puck in Prince George if they want to, move up the standings and, take on a Everett or a Kamloops or a Portland in the first round and have an opportunity to actually beat them. Portland or Prince George didn't have a great playoffs last year, but they should have a pretty decent one this year, just based off the fact that their offense can win them games. So we'll see what happens there. After Prince George, we kind of get into this race for the final spot, and we'll start with the Kelowna Rockets. They are currently at eighth place in the West. They're holding down that final playoff spot. At the moment, 29 points in 36 games. Their big issue is scoring goals. Their goaltending has been okay. Yuri Kaikkonen, 904 in 16 games. Talon Boyko, 891 in 21 games. So that's really, we'll see what happens. But Andrew Crystal, absolutely fantastic so far this season. Gabriel Strutz, 37 points in 26 games. You have Adam Kidd, 23 points in 20 games. And then Caden Price, who's another draft-eligible player, at 22 points in 36 games. So Kelowna, they might be an 8th seed at the moment, but they do have potential. They are they do have some exciting players, especially Andrew Crystal, who might be a top 5 pick in this year's draft. But we'll really see what happens if their goaltending and their defense can kind of limit the opportunities that the other team is going for. In 9th place, we have the Victoria Royals at the moment. Here, the big question around the Victoria Royals is, what impact is Gannon Larocque going to make on this team now that he's back in Victoria? They did stabilize their goaltending with Braden Holt, who's been their best player since arriving. 4 games, he has a 941 save percentage and 3 wins. They have gone through 6 goaltenders this year. That's not necessarily the best, but also Robin Spausk, he comes over after the World Juniors, so we'll see how he goes. But Brain Sherman, one of the most underrated players in the entire WHL, has a fantastic shot. Jake Poole, Tion Patton, and Riley Gannon, as well as these guys are strong offensively. So Victoria is really pushing for that final playoff spot. We'll see if they can overthrow Kelowna. They have played 3 more games than the Kelowna Rockets have, so that will work in their that will work against them here. But we'll see what happens. We've seen teams pull off late runs like last year. Victoria almost made the playoffs last year, got eliminated on the last day. So we'll see what happens. And then at the bottom of the pile there, we got the Spokane Chiefs. Now, this is a team that did a lot of selling, as we've talked about. We'll see what happens with Spokane if they are going to make a late run. 36 games, 17 points. They're not out of it just yet. So we'll see if they can, put some wins together. But this is a team that's rebuilding. Very, very, very simple. Majority of the roster are 16 and 17-year-olds. Berkeley Cadden, who is Berkeley Catton's going to lead that rush next year. He's supposed to go potentially first overall or in the top 3 in the next year's draft. So we'll see if he can really step it up. But if he can really step up his game and be that player that goes, first overall or in the top 3. Outside of that, they have just a really good mix of guys, and a playoff appearance could be very beneficial for this team because it gets them that opportunity to play in those high intense situations, and could help them with their development down the line. So we'll see what happens with Spokane. Like I said, at the moment, they're not out of the playoff race yet, but they would have to go on a pretty big run, especially considering that a lot of their games are against the U.S. division coming up. And we'll see if they can do it. If they can, that's great for the organization. Even if it's just a 4-game series for these rebuilding teams who are really focused on bringing up the next generation of top WHL talent, that playoff experience really is, you can't really put a price on that playoff experience. So we'll see if we'll see if Spokane can make a run and what they can do now that the trade deadline is over. So as mentioned, the WHL trade deadline is over. We're going to give 2 winners here. We're not going to give any losers off of this, but the 2 winners of the trade deadline and trade season are Seattle and Kamloops, because those teams really went for it. We'll talk, Everett did great getting draft picks. Vancouver did great getting draft picks. But for this year, at this trade deadline, for what teams needed to do, Kamloops and Seattle just smashed it out of the park, got exactly what they needed. I know that in a lot of these cases are rentals, but you know what? Rentals don't matter. It doesn't matter if they're a rental or if they play an extra year if you win a Memorial Cup in the end. So make sure that you keep your eyes out for plenty of content here on the Area 51 Sports Network. We got a ton of WHL content coming out. We have Canucks coverage, UFC coverage. We have some OHL coverage as well. Whitecaps are starting up in a couple weeks, so make sure to check out everything that you can on Area 51 Sports, sportsnet.com. Like I said, there you can find all of the great content, and make sure to check out on Twitter feed, because the WHL on Area 51 account will be tweeting out different trades, different articles, and any information you need to know. So for the Area 51 Sports Network and the WHL on Area 51 Network, I'm Adam Kurzenblatt. Thank you for watching the 2023 WHL Trade Deadline Extravaganza.